You're listening to TalkTainmentRadio.com.
The views and opinions expressed are those of the host and guest and not necessarily those of TalkTainmentRadio.com, the management, the staff, or K&E World Network, LLC.
This is Motives of the Heart, an uplifting and inspirational show bringing joy to the heart. I'm Mimi P. Motives of the Heart, SMITTY observation. As for me, there are certain things in life that is guaranteed. Faith in God, family, Texas, and death. Observation is a very important thing. As I will speak to you about how I observed a nurse and an aide that took care of my mom. Observing how the aide, who was male, was cleaning my mom the day before her passing. As I sat there and observed as he cleaned her waist of her body, there was two things that struck my attention. First of all, as he was cleaning her waist, he was speaking to her, just having a conversation. Secondly, the conversation was something of what only she could have spoken to him about, and how her opinion was on something. My mom was a quiet woman, and she was private about her business. It caught me off guard because usually the aides and the complete staff, including the nurses, if ever someone was to come in there to bathe her or clean her waist, they knew to turn the TV off and turn on her gospel music so she could just relax to the best she could. It struck me because she looked at him, and as he was speaking, she wasn't silencing him just not to speak, but not to speak of what he was talking about. She never opened her mouth, but her stare caught his attention. And I knew he understood when he said, "Aw, we talked about it before." And then he just went on to a different topic. He began to talk about how he was as a young man, how he had overcome his habit of drinking. He said when he was younger and lived in a different city, how he enjoyed drinking. He was at the age now where he could even drink among other family members. He was legal age. He enjoyed being able to drink at celebrations, whether it be just a family gathering, holidays, birthdays, and also hanging out with his friends. It made him feel as an adult, and he felt good. Then he said he came to the point where he realized it wasn't as much as he thought it would be. It wasn't as fun anymore. For there was days he would wake up and had to go to work the next day. He had a hangover. He would be throwing up, headache, and he just didn't feel good. His whole body ached. But he had work ethics, so he knew it was important for him to go do the job he was paid to do, for they trusted him to show up as scheduled. He would go, and he would do his job, but it wasn't at his top performance. And he didn't feel good the entire day, or at least most of the day. And then secondly, and even more importantly, he didn't like it when family members were telling him about behavior he had did the night before, whether it was funny or something not so funny. But he had no remembrance of it at all. That made him feel bad. So he decided to start drinking less. He would drink, but cut it off after a certain amount of drinks. He said, but that didn't always work because he always seemed to go past the number of drinks he had set. And he still was having the occasions of waking up drunk or feeling terrible and had to go to work. And still, those times when people would say something he did the night before or maybe a couple of days before, and he had no memory of it. So he said he thought to himself, I must overcome this. And to overcome this, I must change my thought process and my actions. So what did he do? He continued to go to every family function and hang out with his friends. Yes, things were different. He said, but he learned to have fun without having to be intoxicated or just to have a drink to soothe his mind. His mind was fine and he could use it and enjoy it. Yes, those are people who said, why don't you have a drink? Or, hey, you're not the fun as you used to be. But he knew it was more important to take care of his body and for him to have a strong mind. It changed some of the friends he hung around, but family still stayed there, and he enjoyed them even more. He found out he enjoyed having fun without always having to take a drink. And as he said that to my mom, she listened patiently. And I stood there and I said, wow, that is nice. I had never heard him speak of anything about his life. But my mom seemed to enjoy it, and he continued to clean her waist. Then I noticed how he gently moved her and how she would just nod and he would say things. It brought me back to the time when she wasn't so friendly with him. He was a male nurse. And in time when she grew up, there were male aides, for he was an aide, I misspoke, not a nurse. But the male aides tended to the male patients. The female aides tended to the females. When my mom first got there, and it was years before, and this was before she was diagnosed with a fatal disease, it was so rough on him and on my mom. She didn't like them saying an aide was going to come in there and help her. She needed 24-hour care. Her arms were in a position and had deteriorated where she couldn't even clean herself. And yet he would come. And she would complain and give him a hard time and refuse. For there was another female aide, but there was only during certain hours that she was there. And then there was times that due to vacation or call-offs, she wasn't there. And they couldn't always get another female aide from another floor to help out. So over time, there was a registered nurse to start helping out. And it wasn't easy on her. It wasn't part of her job description because of the compassion she had. And from my mom's age, she understood how my mom grew up, believing men took care of men, women took care of women. So when she could, she tried to intervene, but it wasn't always possible. Also, their relationship grew because also there were female aides that my mom didn't think they gave her the right care. She would say they came in and when they wiped her, they would wipe her real hard. And she said, Luella, I go to move, and sometimes they say she didn't seem to be moving fast enough. She didn't think they gave her the respect as a patient or someone older than them. She would say how she would turn on the call light and they wouldn't respond. But he would. Or the females took so long. Even if he had to take a time, he would come in there and tell her, I'll be with you. I have to finish this other patient. And he would come back. So after a time period, I said, Ma, since you're complaining about the females so much not getting there so fast, turn on the call light soon as you go to the bathroom. And she would leave the door cracked so she could see the clock on the wall. Once while I was still living in Akron, and before she was diagnosed with the fatal disease, she called me after 11 p.m. and said she had been in there for about 40 minutes and nobody had responded. I got out of bed and went to the nursing home. And you can go. You ring the doorbell and it takes some time for somebody further in there to come answer the door. But I went there and I did share and speak my dissatisfaction of the matter. And she was still there in the bathroom waiting to be cleaned. The nursing home did discipline the health aide. But the point is, you still have to be there to show up for family. And let's continue with SMITTY observation. My mom would tell me after a while how SMITTY came and she didn't want him to wipe her, but he was coming anyway, and how he seemed to be always smiling. And she said, I don't like him smiling. He always smiling when he coming in here. Then over time, I said, does SMITTY's smile always irritate you? She said, no, that's just him. And she said how he speaks and talks. She had come to know that's just him. But he was always there. And then there was times, even before my mom's fatal disease, that because she moved so slow, that there was times she had accidents in her clothes, or she was on her way to the bathroom and didn't make it in time. When the light was turned on, either an AIDE or sometimes the AIDE would get a maintenance person to come clean up. She said they always made her feel so ashamed that she done that, and she felt bad enough. But she would say when SMITTY come in there was times he came and cleaned it up. He would always look at her and say, it's okay. Sometimes when you get older, you don't move so fast. This is just my job. And I even observed one time when he wasn't happy about it because it was waste instead of urine. And I seen him work it through his own self. By the time he was done cleaning it up, because he didn't call a maintenance person, he looked up at her and told her, Mama, it's okay. It's all cleaned up and you're okay. He said, I'll be back and clean you up. And he did. He came back and cleaned her up. And it made her feel at ease. And he would say, are you okay now? All cleaned up. Forget about it. And I seen how he said that to my mom and she smiled. And those things went through my mind as he was cleaning my mom that day. But I also noticed that day that with my mom's waist, some of it went up her back. And they did have her vision to be able to cover that. But he just didn't wash her back. He turned around after he cleaned all that waste. He turned around and washed her entire body. And as he did that, I noticed how he would tell her to turn or switch and talk to her. She did it, and she would just look at me, and everything he asked her, she did it so gently and kind. And she even would smile at him as he smiled at her. She smiled different for him than I seen her smile for others, even the registered nurse that would help her. She smiled as if she appreciated all his patience and all that he had done over the years, and that what she didn't understand, he was patient enough to get her there. And as he was doing the bottom of her feet, massaging them, for him doing the exercises to keep her body movement alive in her feet, I asked him, why are you doing that? Can I lotion my mom's back? I knew he was going to do it, but I wanted to do it. And he said, sure, that's your mama. Take care of mama. And then he looked at my mom with a smile as I took that lotion. I had didn't even put the gloves on that time, but I took a bunch of glob of lotion and put it in my hand and rubbed my hand together so to warm up the lotion to touch her body. And I rubbed her body, and he seen her face. I don't know what she did with her face, but he said, look, mama, you enjoying your daughter taking care of you. Daughter taking care of mama. And then we continued to lotion her. And when he was all done, he'd take care of her to position her, because her body at times needed to position differently. Then he would say, Mama, you good? You comfortable? And she was nod. And he said, Mama, you comfortable? She opened her eyes and nod so he can see. And I noticed how he wanted her to open her eyes so he could see in her eyes she was comfortable if she was able. And then he said, okay, Now remember, if you need me, call 1-800-SMITTY and I'll be here. Or turn on your call light and I'll come in. As Smitty cleaned up the waste and was preparing to leave the room and was tying up the trash basket, I walked over to him and I said, Smitty, I do a program and I would like to be able to come and interview you. I said, because you talked about how you had to overcome as a young person. I would love for this to be an inspirational story for the young to understand. Once you realize you need help, you can do it. You have to have a mindset to change and to understand, so does your actions. He said, sure, no problem. I'm here every day, same time. And he turned and left out. As I turned and went and sat down next to the bed to my mom and watched her. She was tired and resting, but she opened her eyes and smiled at me and grinned, as if to say she agreed for what I asked Smitty. Then she closed her eyes and rest. I sat there observing her and watching her, and could see she was comfortable and resting. Then I got up and stood next to her bedside, just wanted to look at her closer and stand near her. Then it took me back to the memory of when COVID-19 was going on. You know, how nobody could go into the hospitals or the nursing home or any facility to visit their loved ones. And it was hard on people. And it was even harder on them. How we had to go to the back of the building and they would crack a window and we could talk to the screen to our loved ones. I remember there was times that I traveled 2 hours up there. And there was days she just didn't feel like coming to the window. It wasn't always physical pain or just physical pain alone. Sometimes the being separated from family and you can't feel that touch or have them in that room with you and y'all in there private and you just doing family, that had been taken away for a time. So I'm not sure if it was a holiday we came to visit right before her birthday or on her birthday. But that day, it was a whole bunch of us. I had driven 2 hours. Family members that's in that city and other cities had driven. And we was just all there together to say hi to her and cheer her on. And we asked a female aide. And the female aide went to my mother's room. We could see her room from the window. The aide went in there for a few seconds, and then she came to the door and said, she doesn't feel well. She doesn't want to come. She turned and looked and said something to my mom again, and then she came to us. And as she was coming to close the door, she said, no, she don't want any company today. But as she went to close the window, Smitty said, wait, I'll get her. The female aide hadn't done anything wrong. She did what was requested of her. But she said, okay. And Smitty told us, just stay right there. I'll get her. She had refused him before too. But on this day, he went in there. And he was in there a couple of minutes. And we there with great anticipation, hoping she'll come. Then he comes to the opening of her door and says, she's coming. Give her time. She's walking slow. She don't feel so good, but she coming. Be patient. Give her time. And we're all there saying, okay, okay. And then she appeared at the opening of her door. And then he looked at us and said, she only want to come this far. She don't feel well. And then as she seen us and she smiled, he said, wait a minute. He said something to her. She said something to him. And then he stepped in front of her, around her walker, and he came before saying, hold on. She does want to come sit and talk with y'all. She's coming to visit. And she came. He positioned her in a chair and she sat down and we laughed and talked for a good while. It was wonderful. And then she said, I'm tired. I love you all. Thank you for coming. And then she looks towards him for him to come get her. The female aide was closer, but she looked to him. He came, said thank you for cheering up Mama, and he closed the window, and we watched him escort her back in the room. As some left, me and a few stood there and waited to see him come out the room. And we waved to him and was saying words that we hoped he could read, and later he told us he did, read our lips to saying, thank you, we appreciate you. And we also told the female aide who was there, thank you, and we left. I remembered that time and I wondered, at what point did things change with their relationship? Long before that COVID, things had to have changed. For even before COVID, it needed to change for him to be able to go in there that day and convince her to come even to the door to say hi when she wasn't feeling well. Later, I would learn when I asked him about it. He said he noticed her smile and he knew to ask her to come and sit. So that relationship, all of what I observed, and when I talked to other family members and they observed, there were also times that we didn't observe. So the times that we asked questions, Ma, did you let Smitty bathe you today? I did. When she said that the first time, I was shocked. She said, I just went on ahead so he can quit bugging me. Or the nurse, she was very wonderful to my mom, but Smitty had told her, as well as the nurse, today I can't, I got too much to do. Or she was on vacation. It still took time, but she felt like he gave her more attentive care and gentleness than even the female aides, especially the younger ones. She said they didn't understand that she couldn't move as fast as she could, and they always seemed to be in a rush. So over time, all of this is building up to this day where I can see his care. But I have to tell you, the registered nurse that she became to be so kind to help my mom, which is a call beyond her duties, is that she said she understood that my mom lived in a different era, a different generation. And even when there was a female aide, she understood that my mom needed someone to be gentle with her. Sometimes the aides need some more experience to understand and to learn to be gentle and how it is, and not to just to say, I have time of a certain time and that's it. Yes, you have that time, but in that time, work in kindness and gentleness. And back to Smitty. Smitty even came to be to where he would help her to eat. Food that she said wasn't always tasty, and if you taste that food, it isn't. But I do want to say there are substitutes for salt, pepper, and sugar. But understand you have to supply that. But first make sure it's approved by the doctor or the staff there. For other elements could be in that seasoning that it works against your loved one. But if they can get around with that and they say, okay, it's up to you to bring it to make it taste a little better. But there was times that she just didn't feel like eating. And I could ask her, Mom, would you eat? And she'd say no. Then the people would go out, and there was a time where Smitty brought the plate back in there, the tray right on back in there, and said, you did not eat. And she said, I don't want to. And Smitty got her to eat. It was so funny. He told her, and of course my mom knew he was joking. He said he was up all night preparing that meal just for her. And she ate it. And I watched her in shock. And then when he left, I said, Mom, why did you eat that food? She ate most of it, not all of it. And she said, just to get him out of here. And then we looked and laughed at each other. Smitty had built a rapport. Not that she would always give in, but sometimes she said, just to get him out the way, to not hear his mouth, And then she learned over time they build a rapport. SMITTY did things and brought a smile even when days were down. How do I know? I was not there to observe. But she would say, I don't feel good today. And then I would call her later on, because some days she would say she didn't feel good and didn't want to talk. And I would call later on and she would say, I'm feeling a little better. And I say, well, what happened, Ma? The pain pills? And she'll say, no, I didn't feel like taking it today. And I said, well, what helped? Did prayer? She said, well, the Lord is here, but it didn't go away. And I said, what happened? She said, SMITTY come in here smiling. And I would laugh and say, God answered it, Mama. He sent SMITTY. Or he would send someone else, she'll say, come in there and say, I wish you feel better. I wish you didn't feel so bad. It would be a different aide. So it's important how the aides interact. Then also remember how there was a time that SMITTY was on vacation for a whole month. And my mom would say, she missed him. And I said, well, why is he gone so long? I thought maybe he was ill. He had went back to his homeland in another country. And when he came back, she smiled when she seen him come through the door. I was on the phone, FaceTime, and she was smiling. And I said, Mama, with that smile, I told her, Mama, who is that? And I heard his voice, and I said, Mama, SMITTY returned. I want you to understand that registered nurse who went beyond her duty to wash my mom and shower my mom also gave time for the aides to understand, no, it's not just somebody else doing your job. But it even brought the attention to the family, for we would talk. And my brother, who had care of my mom, of her health, we would speak to him, and he would talk to the higher staff. And it wasn't about just discipline. It was maybe giving them some retraining. When you're dealing in that profession, it's not just knowing how to train somebody to do a bathing or feeding. Compassionate and care and gentleness is something you have to be taught. And then it has to come from your inwardness. And so things would do better with the other ones. And then when one registered nurse retired, another one came on. And when between us interactions and things got better between her and my mom and with us. And it got to be that sometimes when she wouldn't take her medicine and we would be there, we had to pull back and go get this registered nurse. And she would say, just let me know when you leave and I'll go in. The medical care that some give. We'll have a family member, a sister that's in the medical profession. They can talk terms to help those in those situations. My mom once was a health aide, so my sister could talk a dialect that we didn't understand to communicate to her. But with SMITTY, there was days she didn't want to get out to bed, but he could come and convince her to get out to bed and to sit in the chair. He could laugh and talk. And then there was times I said, well, Mom, what you and SMITTY talked about? What me and SMITTY talked about? And I just giggled. I never thought it was anything inappropriate, or she would tell it. But she would just say, he has stories. He has funny stories. I want to say, take care of family. Practice first with each other to get a love and kindness of care. Observe those in the family taking care. I'm Motives of the Heart. Me, P. Have a good day.